Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Udolena and every Sunday I post videos about topics that I'm interested in based on books that I read, things that I think about and happen around in my life. So if you're new here, be sure to subscribe. There's a lot of similar content. Today I'm going to talk about the concept of technological unemployment, and for this purpose I'm going to speak about three writers and kind of share their opinions and also my personal view of technological unemployment. This is a very important topic for me because I am a technology knowledge worker, so they say. I work for Google, and everything that I share on this channel is my own personal observations and thoughts on the process. But it's interesting because I have also a bit of an insider view coming from a large digital company. So the concept of technological unemployment is very old. It's probably from the last 200 years. People have been fearing the progress, the sudden technological progress that humanity is experiencing. It's unthinkable. If you just imagine around the beginning of the technological revolution, let's say the Industrial Revolution, everything that humanity had and knew, they have been knowing for thousands of years, including things like banking, mining, plowing, most of the agricultural species, most of the most of the animals that we breed for food. Pretty much all these have been known to human and been used the same way for thousands and thousands of years. Machines, and especially like such rapid technological improvements in technology, are something relatively new in our history, and the acceleration by which they're happening are just not catching up with our biological development. And this is kind of the first argument. Actually, this comes from an essay by a writer called John Maynard Keynes, an economist, British economist, very, very interesting one. I encourage you to have a look at his essays of persuasion. Basically, he was able in the 1920s, post-Great Depression, to kind of figure out more or less and predict the history of Europe, how it's going to develop about a century further. And the last essay of the book is actually called Economic Possibilities for Our Grandchildren, 1930. And he talks about 100 years from 1930, so 2030, around our time. And he thinks first that over this time period where he was talking about technological unemployment, there is a very strong sense of pessimism in the Western world post the Great Depression because of such a strong economical problem. And he says like this is temporary, humanity is going to go over it, and on the contrary of the popular opinion that we have now gone stagnant and we are old and suffering the pains of rheumatism, of old age, it's the opposite. We are suffering from the pains of growth, growth happening way too fast for us to comprehend. And this comes into society changes, this comes into labor changes, comes into technological, business improvements, accumulation of wealth. And he believes that provided certain conditions are met, and I'm going to mention which ones, in the next 100 years, people are going to witness what he calls technological unemployment, which means, machines are going to do the work, but doesn't mean that people are going to be suffering. On the opposite, what he means by the automation and technology is that humanity is for the first time since its beginning going to solve its economical problem. And the main economical problem since the beginning of the Bible is that Adam has to toil and work and earn their bread by the sweat of his brow. What it means that we are accustomed to hard physical labor, and if you explore most of the cultures, actually you have these proverbs about who is not working, he should not eat. This is a Bulgarian proverb, which is coming from a very strong agricultural society where if you don't work, you're literally going to starve and die. And this, he predicts, is not going to be the case. especially as technology enters agriculture, which we have seen in the 20th century, the overproduction of food, then it becomes a process of growing pains, and once these are solved, humanity will come into a new era, which would mean that everybody will have income. Maybe what we hear now more and more often talked about is the universal basic income, regardless whether you're employed or not, and this will free them up from the necessity of work. Maybe they won't be living like a super rich life, but they will have their basic needs met. Let's say have a roof above their head, have the food, their education for their children. Basically, the main requirements for living are met. Then the biggest problem comes, what do you do with your life? If you no longer have to work, if you no longer have to sweat, your life, it's very easy, especially for people that have been conditioned for thousands and thousands of years to work hard, to experience emotional distress and trauma and depression, mental sicknesses, because they don't know how to fill up this leisure time. And we start to see this gradually, where people are kind of looking into all kind of ways of entertainment, often going to negative cycles of, let's say, abusing substances, or going to depression just because they don't feel that they're doing enough physical activity, enough to justify their existence. It's so much ingrained into our brain that we have to work in order to exist, that if you don't work, you feel useless. It can be like very traumatic to the human soul. So this is kind of one of the biggest problems of technological unemployment, is not that machines are going to take over our job and we're going to starve. Machines are going to take our jobs because we want them to, so that we can free up our time. This is what all our predecessors wanted all their life. Solve our economical problems and live happily ever after. But the problem is, what we're gonna do then? Then there are also some other observations on Keynes now. Writers like Yuval Noah Harari, if you have watched my video on Homo Deus or Sapiens, he's the writer of both books, very successful, interesting books which I reviewed. He talks about the unemployable classes of the future, that the machines will evolve. Let's say, imagine when the independent driving vehicles become the norm and taxi and lorry drivers are jobless. For now we depend on them, but let's say if automation reaches these levels, and we see that there's a lot of work to be done, but it's getting there, it might become visible into our lifetime, that there will be classes of people who have to consistently reinvent themselves. And here comes the question, how much can you reinvent yourself? Especially if you are at a certain age, it becomes more and more difficult for you to change completely your way of living. And he predicts that there will be some kind of basic income, guaranteed income for people who are unemployed, so that they can have their basic needs met. And his idea is that possibly that they will be pushed to virtual reality entertainment, or living into kind of some kind of virtual game in order to feel content. Although this sounds really creepy and crazy, but have a look at his work. It's very, very interesting, and actually based on a lot of research he has done. He says that it's not actually as scary as it sounds, because we have been playing deep games and feeling enormous satisfactions from them for thousands of years. And one example is religion. He's a famous atheist, so if you're religious, don't read Yuval Noah Harari. But in his works, he often mentions that, like religion and the rules and laws of religion are pretty much the laws of a game, where you earn points, and if you earn enough points, you get to the next level, aka heaven. And as a proof, he says that some of the people with highest life satisfaction in the world are in Israel, and these are people which are basically paid universal basic income by the government in order to study the holy books and to devote their life to religion. So they don't work, they're not rich, they actually live very poor life, but they have a roof above their heads, they have food on their table, and they devote their life to religion and to studying the old scriptures. And they are some of the happiest people in the world. So he said that it is the fact that we cannot see the game is kind of like finding Pokemon. Like the fact that you don't see the Pokemons doesn't mean that people who are searching for them are not getting immense satisfaction from the game. So it's an interesting question, but he kind of argues that the future of these unemployed classes will be into these virtual reality worlds where we've been actually dwelling in before, like we've been experimenting, of course, without having the technology of creating virtual worlds, but with our imagination. And essentially, like even material things that we experience are actually, the sensation is within our heads. It's not really the machine itself. It can be a very, very strong simulation, which kind of, it's like a program, again, like the Matrix. And then we come to the third writer, which I'm going to mention today, and this is David Greaber and his famous book Bullshit Jobs. Actually, it's an article he wrote in 2013, you should check it out. And he talks about Keynes, kind of an analysis of Keynes after 100 years. Why have we not reached this famous technological unemployment? Why, instead of working less hours, like 3-hour week, which Keynes predicts, we have 50, 60, 80 hours a week, and we kind of venerate this culture. You can see in China, in Korea, we have like these technological firms which are pretty much working on automation, and still people are required to work crazy hours in order to do their jobs. Another interesting fact he mentions is that in the West, specifically amongst professionals, we're not talking about the working class, about office professionals, 54% in UK and 47% in the United States consider their jobs useless. These are people working in finance, people who are doing telemarketing, people who are doing PR, HR, all kind of administrative jobs which have grown significantly, and they all have to perform all these useless tasks day after day after day, and these are kind of intelligent people with education. It makes them feel extremely miserable. So in his book Bullshit Jobs, he believes that this is actually a means of control. He believes that it is a means of control. As people have too much leisure time on their hands, they will start to be too conscious. They will start to question the system and make problems, protests, and trigger a lot of thinking, which elites apparently don't want. Which is an interesting point as well. I think that the current obsession with working and being proud of working long hours, especially on your job, and kind of even bringing this into a cult, it is leftover of these highly ingrained in our heads times when our predecessors had to justify their existence and had to justify their bread, earning their bread by the sweat of their brow. Because we are not sweating anymore, we feel that the need that we have to show that we are doing something, that what we are like enjoying, especially people in managerial positions, CEOs, people which essentially are useless and have very, very high incomes. Maybe they feel that their job is not so important, and like if their job disappears, the world is not going to stop turning. They feel the need more and more to justify their existence by spending long hours on useless tasks. And on the other hand, we have a class of workers which now actually became even more and more visible post the corona lockdowns, we are extremely dependent on. So lorry drivers, our automation still hasn't reached that stages that we no longer need lorry drivers. We still need teachers, we still need nurses, we still need caregivers, and we're gonna need even more in Western Europe in the future. Butchers, see, there's a crisis of lack of butchers in the UK post-Brexit. So it is a huge class of very underpaid workers who essentially, if they stop working, all the PRs, the managers and the CEOs are completely useless, and they cannot even get any food on their table because we completely depend on the work of these people. Which is it's a huge paradox, and it shows, I think, that we are still not achieved the technological unemployment, but we are on our way. What Keynes mentioned in his book is actually that there are 3 prerequisites that we reach this level of technological paradise within 100 years. And first is controlling overpopulation, which we have not been able to control over the 20th century. However, with the steep declining birth rates amongst multiple countries, I think this is going to be achieved in the future. Then, avoiding major wars. This is a very important part. Humanity could not avoid the Second World War and the Cold War, which destabilized a lot of economies. And then, provided these two are met, accumulation of wealth continues. And because these both haven't been met, accumulation of wealth have been disturbed. In some countries where we see actually closest to the technological unemployment time, is actually, if you look at these are United States, Great Britain, countries that have been less affected by massive wars, by overgrowth of population. And we see that they're having the first signs of this technological unemployment future. However, I think that we are on our way. Maybe it will take a little bit longer than Keynes thought, just because he predicted some caveats to the development of humanity, but we're going to reach this point. And here's the important part. When you no longer have to work, what are you going to do with your life? What are you going to do? Like, are you going to focus on maybe on meditation practices, mindfulness? Are you going to pursue a hobby? Are you going to think about what gives you real joy in life? And I think where a lot of people are starting to think is in this direction, actually not about crazy working hours, but like the meaning and the joy of life that you can experience when it's no longer necessary for you to toil for your bread. So question to you is, what are you going to do if you don't need to work anymore? So comment below, let me know in the comments. Please be sure to subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you with a new video next week.